everybody, this is Michelle Fox and welcome back to The Simple Quilter. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a ragtime denim quilt. Okay, so I wanted to do a little bit closer up view so that you could see the materials that we will be using. Alright, the first thing you're going to need is your fabric. These are the 10-inch squares that I showed you how to cut in my last video, and all these were cut out of old denim jeans. Now you can use denim fabric that you purchase off the bolt if you'd like, but these are from the old jeans that I've been given. You'll also need some cotton fabric. I'm going to be using the same cotton fabric on all my squares, so all my squares will be the same, and I absolutely love this. It has little ants on it, and it's that red and white traditional picnic tablecloth pattern, and I just love that. I think it's perfect for the picnic quilt. Alright, you're going to need your rotary cutter, your mat, and I have 3 rulers out here. I have the Creative Grids 12.5 inch. I have my 8.5 by 24.5 inch Creative Grid ruler. I also have my Omni Grid ruler. This is a ruler that I'm just going to use for marking. When I mark fabric or my half square triangles, I don't typically use the same ruler then to cut fabric, because sometimes you get ink residue or lead residue on your pen and it will come off on your fabric. So this ruler, even though it's an acrylic ruler for cutting, I'm just going to be using it for drawing lines. This is a little gadget that I've made. You don't have to have this, but all I've done, this is a fine piece of sandpaper, and I took a glue stick and I glued it onto this piece of cardboard. Then on the back, I glued on a piece of non-slip shelf paper. You can use hot glue here, but on the front, just use a glue stick. Otherwise, it will be bumpy and it will be hard to make your fabric. And again, this is not a necessity. This is just a little optional thing that you'll see me use. You'll need a marking pen. Again, you know that the sew line is one of my favorites. I told you in one of my videos before that I really like the glass head silk pens that are 0.5 millimeters, but I needed something that didn't bend quite so easily. So I'm trying out these 2.5 inch 7 millimeter pens with a plastic head on them. Okay, and then this is my Aerofill thread, and on here you can see, well, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but it says 40/2. This is a 40 weight 100% cotton thread. The 40 weight is a little bit heavier than the 50 weight that I typically use, just using 100% quilting cotton, but because I'm using the denim, I wanted a little bit heavier thread. So this is the Aerofill 40 weight, and I have the same type of thread, just a darker blue, on my machine. I'll be using the Schmetz Blue Jean needles that are just more durable than the universal needles, and these sew through the denim just a little bit better. Now these are a Fiskars 8.5 inch soft touch spring action rag quilter snips. So you will need a pair of those. I've already told you how to cut the denim squares in my previous video on how to turn old jeans into denim fabric, so there's a link below that will take you to that video, or you can watch my previous video to see that. And you're just going to want to cut how many ever squares you need for the size of the quilt that you want. I'm going to be making my quilt 9 squares by, or 8 by 9, so I'm going to need a total of 72 10-inch squares of my denim, and the same thing for my cotton fabrics. Alright, so let me show you how to cut this cotton fabric. Now the first thing you want to do is you want to get your fabric, you want to press it or iron it, and then you're going to want to fold it in half, and you're going to want to kind of get it lined up. If you can see there, the fabric kind of has waves in it and it's not laying real flat. Can you see that at the bottom? So you're just going to adjust the top here until you have a really nice lay to the fabric with no wrinkles, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we're going to lay that down there with the fold closest to me. Okay, so that's nice and ready to start cutting. I'm going to take my 8.5 by 24.5 inch ruler, and I'm just going to trim up the edge. Alright, so I want to be sure that one of the lines on the ruler, this is the 1/2 inch line, goes right along the bottom of my fold line. And I'm just going to clean this edge up so I have a nice, clean, straight edge to cut on. Okay, now I need a 10-inch square, and since my ruler, this ruler is only 8.5 inches, I'm going to use my 12.5 inch square. I'm going to put it on 10 inches. I'm going to line this up here and then along the bottom. Then I'm going to take my 8.5 by 24.5 and I'm going to butt it up against my 12.5 inch square that I just have marked to 10 inches. I'm going to move that out of the way, hold this really stable, and make my first 10-inch cut. Alright, now that I have that, I'm going to trim the edge off here because this is the selvage edge, and I'm just going to make a nice cut there. Then I can start subcutting my 10-inch squares. Alright. There's two. One more, lining it up with the 10 here and the 10 along the bottom. Okay, and there's 4 squares. So you're going to want to go ahead and cut all of your 10-inch squares. Okay, so now that you have all of your fabric cut, and I have my fabric cut, I'm going to show you how to mark the X's on the fabric denim squares. Okay, so again, here's just my little gadget I use to hold my fabric stable. I'm going to take my Omni Grid ruler that I just used to mark with, and I'm going to line up my points. Now the reason I mark this is because I don't do well sewing a straight line without a guide. A lot of people can do that, but I can't, so I just mark these. And I'm marking pretty heavy so I have a pretty good line. Okay, so you don't have to worry about these lines staying on your quilt because you have to wash the Ragtime denim quilts, and this is just pencil lead and this will wash out. Okay, so then you can see we have an X right there on that denim. And you're going to want to mark all of your denim on the correct side. Don't use the back side, use the front side. Alright, again, I'm a person that pins just about everything, so I have to pin my squares together to hold them and keep them from slipping. So this, you're going to take your cotton fabric and your denim and you're going to put wrong sides together. See, this is the front side of the denim. You're going to want to line those up good. And there's the front side of the 100% cotton fabric. Now I told you I was using these new pins. They're rather long, kind of hard to get through the fabric, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and use them anyway until I find something better. I already know that my glass silk head pins are not going to work because they bend. Okay. And I'm going to pin 9 of these together to sew a row so I can show you how this is done. Now when you pin, you want to avoid the lines because our sewing machine is going to be coming down there, so you want to be sure you're... Okay, so let's get started sewing here, and let me show you how we're going to do this. I'm just going to feed the square in and just sew right on those lines that I drew. And I'm going to do what they call chain sewing. I'm just going to sew one right after another. Feed these through again and sew down the other line, the other side of the X. Okay, so I'm going to finish doing this with my squares, and then I will show you how to connect the squares together. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to sew these together. First of all, we're going to get 3 pins and we're going to pin them together. Now you want to be sure to check to make sure you have the correct sides facing outward. We're going to put the 2 denim pieces together, and I like to pin these like this, where you go just straight in on that sew line. It should come out right on the back sew line, and then just pin them so that those will line up good. Alright, pin the other one together. Not sure these pins are the best, but I'm going to sew these together. Don't sew over those big thick pins, you break a needle. Okay. Then you're going to take that one. Then I'm going to sew these 2 together to make 4. Then I'm going to sew these 2 together to make 4. Excuse me, after I correct that, then I'm going to sew this 5th one onto this 4th one, and then I'm going to sew them all together into one big long row of 9. And then I'm going to go ahead and sew another row of 9, and I will show you how to connect those together. Okay, so I've got all my blocks sewn together. My row of 9 are all sewn together, and I wanted to show you how I press open these seams. Alright, I just take my iron and just press those seams open. Now my iron is on a very high setting, and it has maximum steam on. Okay, you want these to lay open. Make a little bit of best press on these last 2. Alright, we need those all pressed nice and open, and because I pin that on the back side, they come to a really nice point, and it makes a really nice X and diamond quilting pattern there on the back. Okay, now I'm going to show you how I pin these together to sew 2 big rows together. Alright, and I'm going to take my pin, I'm going to go straight in on that seam line, line it up with the back seam line, straight in there, and then pin it back through so that it's pinned on that sew line, because I want those points to match up. Then in the second one, I have a little point there and a little point there, and I'm going to put the pin straight through both of those so that they're coming out together. Now I tell you what, I'm just not sure about these pins. I like the length of them, and they're strong, but they're not very sharp. Okay, and then I'm just going to pin each of these. Then when I have them all pinned, I'm just going to sew my 1-inch seam allowance all the way down there. Alright? Okay, I was going to go ahead and sew this up, but and not show you, but I am going to show you. This is a lot of fabric to sew through. You've got 2 layers of denim, and 2 layers of cotton here, and then you've got 4 layers of denim and 4 layers of cotton at each seam. So I went ahead and put my walking foot back on. It just seems to work better. I think I'm having a little difficulty with my walking foot. You'll hear it make a lot of noise, but I went ahead and put it back on and it seems to be working okay. So I'm just going to show you, you do need to go kind of slow across these big thick seams, and I've also got these big thick seams pinned. So I want to be sure that both seams are open on the back and on the front. I'm going to be sure to take these pins out and just go really, really slow. Okay, so here I have a total of 6 rows sewn together, and I'm going to sew these last 2 rows to these 6 rows. Now this quilt is getting heavier and heavier, so put this up here on my ironing board, and okay, we want to be sure those seams are flat and that they're not doubled over like that. Want to be sure they're flat, completely flat. My other row here, and I'm going to line those up just like I did the others, and I'm going to start pinning. Okay, so here is the last little bit of this quilt. I ended up making mine 9 squares by 9 squares, so that ended up being 81 squares. I wasn't sure I was going to have enough fabric, but I did, so I went ahead and made it a little bit bigger because this is for this is a gift for a family, and they're all pretty tall, so I made that a little bit bigger simply because I had the fabric. I went ahead and I finished the last sewing, and I did a 1-inch line of stitching around the entire quilt. Now this is important. You need to put this last stitching on there. Okay, it goes all the way around the quilt. I didn't think you needed to see me just sew in a straight line, but I want to show you how to clip this. Now I talked about the rag quilter snips, and I just want to show you how I do this. My daughter Amy likes to cut these for me, and I'm always so happy because this isn't my favorite thing to do. Okay, so what you're going to do right here at the seam, I just have one side, and you're just going to snip it. You're going to snip down the other side. Now, you want to be really careful not to cut into the seam line. If you cut into the seam line, then you're going to have a hole there. So be sure you are cutting back away from that seam line. Okay, so once you get past the seam, you can hold both of those layers of fabric up and snip. Alright? And you're just going to do that all the way around the quilt. Now I'm going to show you, so what we do is we do all of these seams going across the quilt, and then we flip the quilt, and then we do these seams. So what you're going to do is you're just going to slip the snips under there and cut up underneath those seams. And you're going to do that on both sides. Now this is where you have to be careful not to cut your fabric, because you'll end up with a hole in your quilt. And because this fabric is so heavy, if you don't patch that, you're going to have a bigger hole quickly just because they're so heavy. Okay, so let me show you here. You're just going to make sure you don't have any unnecessary fabric, and then you're just going to clip that. Okay, now I wanted to show you how to clip around the very edge of the quilt too, out here on the outside edge. Okay, so what I do is we clip along like this, and we do about a 1/2 inch apart. Maybe, let me see, maybe a little bit more, maybe 5/8, 1/2 inch to 5/8. Then when we get here, we just do a diagonal cut. Just a short diagonal cut there on the corner. And then we just continue doing those vertical cuts all around the quilt. Okay, you can see the finished quilt is behind me, and you do need to wash and dry the quilt at least twice, and you need to be sure to use a washer and dryer that both have filters, and those filters will need to be checked during the washing and drying process several times so that the filters don't get clogged up, because there will be a lot of threads and little pieces of fabric that come off, and you don't want that to clog up your machine, cause your washer to flood, or your dryer to overheat. So be sure that when you wash those, again, you're using a washer and a dryer that both have filters. Now, my next video is going to be, I'm going to be putting together a pumpkin table runner, getting ready for the holiday season. Please hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and by all means, please leave a comment if you have a comment, question, or suggestion. And I have a question for you all today. So, what pins do you use for pinning denim fabric? I struggled with that, and I need a little help on that. So, that's my question to you all for today. Until next time, have fun quilting.